let's start casting. Because right now, it's you and I are going through it. We're swimming in upstream pretty good.
Yeah, with no arms. That's
Right.
my problem.
Right. And so let's get on it, because the holy grail of the future of any political party in our nation is we're looking at it right now. We are looking at probably the holy grail. She who gets there first will probably own the majority vote for a long period of time. And it's interesting to see how much this and how much that, but how much the border and how much immigration and how much issues that we're having. We're hearing bigwigs, and look, Elon Musk can speak about the H-1B visas fairly intelligently. Trump as well speaks about those fairly intelligently, but the reality is not what they don't know the boots on the ground on that. And H-1Bs and the difficulty in acquiring those and the money that it takes behind it is what's I don't want to say inhumane, but it's kind of the there's not a level playing field with an H-1B, nowhere near one. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, well, the arguments are weird, and I didn't know until I'd heard, let's get rid of the H-1B program because for whatever reason they didn't like it, and then Trump or not even Trump, Elon Musk kind of defended it, saying, hey, we've used it a lot and we get talented people and whatever else. And then and there wasn't really an argument against that. And the new argument that I'm hearing is that, oh no, what they do is they bring them here and then they undercut the U.S. salaries. The problem I have with that is there's a whole analysis that goes into before they can even get here as to what they have to pay them. So they're not undercutting them at all. But then there was an argument, well, they are, because then they're firing the managers and then they're moving them up for a little bit less money as they move up. I'm like, sure. Are we we're an economic capitalistic society. And so if we can get cheaper workers at one point, but it's not, the H-1B initially is not doing that.
And it's
now,
yeah,
if a company
is
then getting that person a green card, and that guy from India is going to work for less money as a manager for $10,000 less than the guy that's been with you for 20 years, and you fire that guy, I don't know, that's a moral issue to me more than an economic issue, or that the H-1B program was wrong in its principle. Because the H-1B, like I said, has a vetting program where you have to pay them a certain wage, which is the going market wage, which is set by the government. So if the own government is now saying that the H-1B program doesn't work, then change it, the amount that they have to pay, and make it match what the market is. But they're already doing that. This is the misconception is that you're bringing in all these foreign laborers and you're undercutting the market, but it's set by the government, so it makes no sense. The companies aren't doing that on purpose. Just what.
So here we are then. Here's baseline then. We got this little topic being tossed around, and it's a little bit of hair on it, and it's a hot potato, and it says immigration on it. Here we go. Hot potato.
Super
hot potato.
ancillary to everything else.
Right. And so here we go. How much does DC need us right now? Common sense, straight up, let's have a policy that works across the board. It's going to not be perfect because nothing ever is, but at least it makes sense. So I'm at the consulate with Reed the other day. Not the consulate. We did it in some, a school.
It's a school
cafeteria, sponsored type deal. And we've done those before. When Reed was a little guy, I would go and do some of those things, and you'd have 8, 9 people there. And the consulate has their cameras around. I'm waiting for my thing to go viral because I spent 9 minutes at the end. Started getting applauses and everybody. I mean, it was like everybody else had spoken this thing for an hour and a half. I was watching paint dry, and nobody's like, and some people would ask questions and ramble on and on and on to these people, and I wasn't going there. They're panicked. And we had, 80, 100 people in there?
There's about 100.
That was nuts. I'd never seen that kind of showing at this little dinky neighborhood in West Phoenix. Again, usually we have 8 to 10, sometimes 12, but most of them are the ones that put it on.
Yeah.
So everybody's panicked. You're getting these calls probably off the hook. I'm getting these calls off the hook. I've got Reed and Noah both asking me, what do we tell these people? They're nervous or they're panicked. They literally think ICE is going to come knock on their door tomorrow because they're watching the news. And they're all spun up. They're watching Boston. They're watching New York. They're watching Chicago. And they're imputing that, well, hold on. Arizona's been having this problem for long before those folks. And so this political hot potato where they're looking for the bad guys and a few undocumented get swooped in. I mean, so the commonsensical approach for me with these folks is, look, keep living your lives, keep moving along in the shadows, unfortunately, you know. Don't hang out with folks that potentially could be on that list. It's good advice anyway. Yeah. Don't hang out with bad folks that are breaking laws and have a bunch of warrants, and you know that they're running drugs or kids or children or whatever. Not a good idea in general. Good rule of thumb. But we're getting calls from all four corners of the universe. You're just on the phone with your buddy growing up who's asking you immigration questions, and I'm sure the last time you talked to him, it wasn't about immigration.
20 years since I've talked to him, so.
So it probably wasn't about immigration.
He's not the first. I had a high school friend call me this week because he's got a Venezuelan girlfriend that he has refused to marry for the last 10 years. And
now he's feeling like a gun to the head.
Pressure, so, yeah.
Hey, did you tell him congratulations?
Poor guy. He's been married a few times, had some bad experiences, so he's trying to shy away from it. But
she's Venezuelan, man.
She's a pretty girl, from what I hear. I don't know.
Well, rock and roll.
Yeah.
So what do you tell them? Do you kind of go with the same approach I did?
So mine's more, exactly. I just don't think that life is worth living if they're going to just lock themselves up in their house. They can't support themselves. Right. They can't. It's just not. At that point, you might as well go back to. And I think that's part of the shock and awe campaign
is to
create this propaganda of fear that just gets people to self-deport. And I never thought that would happen. But maybe there are going to be some that do. So maybe there is some strategy to what Trump's doing. But for the most part, for the people that are going to stick it out, I tell them exactly that. Look, it's not don't go anywhere. It's just have caution. Like, please don't commit a crime. And not that any of them were going to do that anyway. Most of the people that are coming to me are not the ones that are going to commit crimes. But I'm even talking about, don't speed.
Right. Make sure your plaques are
make sure
your registration
your
is up to
red
date.
Or your tail lights are working because don't give them an excuse to pull you over. I don't know. And maybe you know this. Has the 287G contracts been renewed now with Mesa and some of these departments? Not that I'd heard yet.
No.
I think they're working on it.
They're working on it.
I think Trump's pushing them to do it. So that's another thing.
He's getting some resistance here.
Yeah, and I know the governor's giving him some resistance, and maybe even because of our history of what has happened in the past with some lawsuits and whatever else in Arpaio, we might be a little bit more trepidatious in doing that. So as those contracts kick up, if they do end up signing them, then I'm telling people, look, then Mesa PD, if they pull you over without having a driver's license and they somehow, I tell them, you don't have to answer questions as to your citizenship. And so don't give them a reason to think that you are Mexican. Right. Don't tell them you're Mexican. Tell them you don't have to answer that question, but make sure you present some kind of form of ID, because if you can't ID yourself, that's the problem. They're going to take you in, and then they're going to do immigration checks or whatever. So I'm giving them the general talk of, here's your rights, here's what not to say, here's what to say. But just be careful. But don't not live your life. I just don't think that that's possible. And I also think there's a ton of social media propaganda and rumors that aren't true. And we know that for sure, because there's been people that have even come out and said, please don't report things on social media if they're not true. I mean, they're not treating these raids, at least. I mean, on social media, they were treating these things like they were literally stopping people like a DUI checkpoint.
Right.
And just checking everyone's papers. And I'm like, if they're doing that, that is so unconstitutional.
Right. And they're not doing that.
They're not. And I've never heard that confirmed.
Right.
And so, I've heard of targeted. I had one yesterday. Wife come in. They were waiting for her husband outside of their house. But the more I dig into it, was like, okay, he was convicted for a smuggling charge 2 years ago. He was let go.
He's got a warrant.
He doesn't have a warrant. He took care of it.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know how they kind of managed this.
Yeah.
Because they picked him up, and then they were like, well, the judge already told him he has nothing, but they have an immigration hold on him. And I'm like, oh, well, that was kind of sneaky. If he's taken care of it, he's paid his probation. I'm wondering what the who was it that stopped? Where did he go? And I'm like, an immigration judge wouldn't have told him that. So he went to criminal court, it sounds like. And somehow the criminal court's like, what are you doing here? I don't have anything for you. But by the way, you got an immigration hold. And so now he's with immigration. So maybe there's games being played. I don't know how, because he had already done. I don't know, maybe it was a probation issue. Like he was still on probation and the probation officer let the
I'm
court.
seeing more immigration holds like you're talking about. That I've seen, well, at least I'm getting more calls for that purpose. Maybe they were always there. Maybe they weren't. I don't, now that it's in front of me, I have to look at it.
Yeah.
And the attorneys here have to kind of explode out and figure that piece out. And pulling somebody from detention, immigration detention, back to the state for resolution is not impossible,
but really tough.
But it's hard.
You've been working on that. Yeah. So I haven't confirmed any of the redadas that they're calling them, the raids where they're, and there was a rumor, somebody told me that, they were jumping into McDonald's. And if they are doing that, and they were just arresting everybody there, if they're doing that, I'm assuming it was they were looking for somebody specific. Mm-hmm. I'm still worried about the constitutionality of then stopping everybody in the business that's working there and asking them for docs.
Right.
I don't know how that's constitutional, but
it's not. But
I don't know if that stuff is happening.
The sooner, look, this is only going to get this fire's only going to burn hotter, in my opinion. And we're just seeing the beginning of it, because what we have, the difference between our Arpaio days, you and I both, lived through those. And frankly, there was a lot of certainty with Arpaio. And to where we were able to figure the good news about Arpaio. And I ended up getting a standing O when I said, look, I couldn't stand Arpaio. And they got a few applauses and yada, yada, yada. And I said, but when he was gone, I missed him, because we knew step by step by what was what. And once he was gone, it was just all the not knowing and all the wiggling around that we had to do, either legally or, giving folks advice. It's like,
well, and to go back to your point, the long run of this, I don't know what's going to happen, because, you've got this shock and awe campaign of detaining all these people, but for those ones that they can put directly on a plane, and let me clarify so everybody knows, if you're being put directly on a plane, it's because you have a deportation in the past, or you've been found here less than 2 years since you entered into the United States. That's where we can do expedited removal. Everybody else cannot be expedited removed. And so that means that they're given court hearings, they're maybe placed in detention, but they'll still have an opportunity to fight their case. So if you're really capturing, and I heard a statistic yesterday that like of the 80 that were caught in Chicago yesterday, 55 of them ended up being non-expedited removal cases or non-criminals. And so those people are going to be placed in court. Look, the more 50 in one city, 50 in another city, the court system's going up. And I know they're talking about hiring more judges, but again, where does the money run out here? Because the more you're placing in there,
your detention centers.
In your detention centers, we've already heard there's problems there, and now they're opening military bases for detention centers. But the thing is even if they do that and they house them there, you still have to have judges that hear these cases. You still have to have attorneys that can go over and see those people and represent them. And
how brilliant my idea was! We got to get there.
Yeah. So
somebody has to go back and look at our pods.
The long run of this, I don't know how long they can keep this up.
They can't
financially.
No, they can't.
But maybe this, like I said, and I'm not okay with it. I don't love the fear. I don't like any communities living in fear, because it creates panic, and it creates things that you're going to start seeing people not report crimes. You're going to see kids not going to school. You're going to see work's going to start to suffer in your industries. I've already heard people in construction not showing up to work and whatever else. Yeah. It's good. We're going to see in a few weeks this kind of the domino effect of it. Mm-hmm. I don't like that part, but maybe, the point was just let's get people aware and see who we can get to self-deport, see who we can get to get out, and then we'll kind of figure it out in the long run.
That's less money. Yeah. That's kind of a freebie.
And maybe it's this shock and awe for a couple months, and then we'll kind of calm it down. And
well, I think it's going to calm down no matter how you slice a banana, but it'll heat back up at will with whatever political party wants it hot. And so the interesting piece here is I really do believe it's the Holy Grail. It's like if you can figure out a common sense. I do like the new approach of common sense on many aspects of government right now. I do enjoy that. as long as it's common sense. And for the most part, I hear a lot more of it. That's good. But it needs to bleed into immigration.
Yeah, right now
like
immigration
fast.
has no conversation other than deport.
Right.
Deport.
We've got to have some common sense, and I think the American people are ready for common sense. I am positive the Latinos are ready for common sense. What did I lead with at the consulate? Just looking at everybody there, it's no tenga miedo, no tenga miedo. And I'm like, don't be scared. For the gringos out there listening to this, don't be scared. Live your lives. Move along. Be smart, much like you started, with. I said all the exact same things he said. Be smart. Make sure the lights are working on your car. I stopped short as far as I didn't really go with, you might want to park your Impala for a while and drive a Buick or a Ford, or, just make sure the tags are good, the lights are on.
And we're going to get some bad cops that are going to find some reason,
we
lived
through that.
You didn't put your blinker on for enough time before you changed lanes.
Exactly. And I know that you're listening to Juan Gabriel.
I hope it's less than the normal. But yeah, I mean, we're going to get people that are going to take advantage of it.
They're sitting there rocking out to Bad Bunny and they're going to get pulled over.
I mean, I heard, again, stories, but Texas came out with a report saying that they had a substitute teacher who was substituting teacher at a primarily Latino school and called ICE and said, come and pick up all these students. They don't speak English. So I'm hoping that kind of stuff, because let's leave the schools and the hospitals alone and whatever else. Come on. I think that's the common sense that I don't want to get involved in. So,
well, they need us. You know that, right? And we've been seeing the worst of the worst here in Arizona. Sorry, Texas. We've been seeing the worst of the worst. We've lived through some real fun tidal waves with Arpaio. Really was a great litmus test on some good, some bad, and a little of everything.
That balance, yeah.
And finding and striking that balance. I mean, living through that with people, real consequences, real life-changing events going on. And you and I worked hand in hand quite a bit all those years. Those were our formative years.
I had people leave during Ohio.
Yep.
I had people come into my office and say, can you offer me anything? And I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, we're out. And now I've had, subsequently them call me and say, hey, how can I come back? Right. And and then at least they're asking me, hey, I want to come back legally. But so I don't know. We'll see how many people exit.
In large part, it's market driven. So just to let's kind of take a step back. Nothing to do with immigration, nothing to do with this silly social media display that's ostentatious in nature. Big word there. I just use a John Wayne word. This ostentatious display. Huh?
I like it.
I know, it was good. It was, what was that? McClintock. It was in McClintock. Okay, there's your homework. Okay. It's a John Wayne movie. I know you're going to watch it.
I've seen about one.
Well, hey, you get to check that off of the list.
Sweet.
But you should watch McClintock. It's a good one.
Walking into my grandpa watching John Wayne movies.
Everybody knew. Oh, I've seen all. Okay.
That was his thing.
I'm an old soul. That said, they're riding this big, huge case through town, and everybody knows there's $1 million in it. And he just walking right through town. He goes, well, what we're doing to his son with this ostentatious display is telling everybody they got to go through us to get it.
Come get it.
So we lived through this, but in 08, 09, we saw Latinos taken off right, left, and forward. And it had nothing to do with deportation. It had nothing to do with lack of papers. It had nothing to do with, there was no work. There was no work. The market dropped, and the freeways were literally spotless clean. I mean, I was driving to Phoenix. First few times driving to Phoenix, getting to court over there was great. Nobody on the freeway. I mean, I had the whole highway with no one on it. I mean, it's a dream come true. No traffic, no nothing. And then after a few times of that, it's like weirdly depressing. Like, I mean, there's no commerce going on. And so some years ago, and I find this to be very interesting, some years ago, there was a movie. It was I've talked about it here, and I said it was a documentary. It wasn't. It was one of those independent things, independent films. And of course, I was this brainiac that graduated in Spanish, so I had to watch things like this. So I didn't do this out of pure curiosity, watch this movie, but it was called A Day Without a Mexican. Okay. I brought it up, and it was almost like a rapture happened, and 0 Latinos were here, and it was based out of, basically it was a Southern California, like what's on fire right now area.
And you don't have vegetables in your supermarket.
It was amazingly, it was crazy how many things it touched, like just even to the traffic.
And I wonder if Trump's afraid of that deep down in his head, because the economic side of things definitely will be affected by this.
Right.
And I know
his industry.
Yeah, I know he's, like I said, we're in this shock and awe period, and just like a war, when we shock and awe, maybe it's the first couple months, and then we kind of see what happens with it. But yeah, if it continues to be at this rate, and they're truly looking to get rid of 10 million people, I mean, it's
the most.
Then he's got to deal with the economic part of it.
Right. The most surprising thing that we found at the consulate, in my opinion, was everybody knew who does the deportation kings and queens are. And that was amazing. Like, who deported more, Clinton or Bush? We just kind of went through it. Who deported more, Bush or, Obama? Who deported more? I mean, they all knew it. They all knew. And I said, so we now know that Trump deported a fraction of the people Obama deported. Okay, all right. No tenga miedo. Let's just live smart. They're in the shadows. That's why they're there.
And I don't know whether it's just the Holman situation, and he just doesn't want to give an inch. And again, I think it's maybe a mental, a psychological war that they're waging a little bit, in the sense that they keep saying we're going after the criminals, but nothing's off the table. They always finish the sentence with nothing's off the table. If you're illegal here, you might get rounded up.
If you're sitting there next to the dude that we're looking for, and you just so happen
and the
to have
statistics
documents,
are kind of playing that out. If the statistics are real, that we're getting half criminals and half non, that's the part that, as we ratchet up, we'll have to see how it affects the rest of the.
Well, that's going to affect the system significantly, because the people they're going after have a one-way ride back to wherever they come from, but the rest remain. And that's a lot of folks going into proceedings.
Yeah.
And anyway, and ICE is already getting sloppy in the jails, already getting sloppy everywhere. They're just literally spending less than 20 seconds with somebody to get them to sign their.
Well, and that was the other thing. Like, the lady yesterday was like, my husband's detained and his buddy with him. And I'm like, okay, but his buddy already signed a voluntary departure. And I'm like, no, that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And she's like, well, he saw a judge, and I was like, no, he didn't see an immigration judge. And I was like, the immigration judges don't do hearings that quickly.
Right.
And so I don't know who he saw. I don't know what he signed, but she's like, oh yeah, he's heading back to Mexico. And I'm like, the only thing I can think of is that he'd already been deported. And she's like, no. I'm like, then I don't know what he signed.
I'm getting that story a lot.
Are you? And so I haven't heard this from my end, and I would be in the trenches of it. I don't know that there's judges that are arraigning these guys within, hours on the immigration side. That's never happened before.
I've never seen
on the border.
Either.
It's happened, but not here. I don't know any.
Well, this is in our jails
judges.
here. This is in 4th Ave, and they spend 15 seconds with our person, get a signature on something he has no idea, and the elevator doesn't go to the top, but he has no idea what he signed and what was that, and now all of a sudden he has a court appearance for the crime, and he's like literally the day before on a bus ride to Florence.
So that makes sense. I'm talking about to Mexico.
Yeah, this one was to Florence.
Yeah, so that means he's still in proceedings if he's going to Florence. The ones that that's
the one I'm trying to yank back right now, one of many.
Yesterday, this lady indicated that guy signed something and he was already on a bus to Mexico, and I'm going,
it's strange.
That doesn't exist anymore. Voluntary departures, or what they called voluntary returns, in the Sheriff Joe days definitely existed. But then Trump took that away in 2016, and so there's no more catch and release stuff. So it's either you're signing a deportation, but I don't know how constitutionally that works. That doesn't work unless it's expedited removal, which you can only do in the border, or 2 years less.
Does anybody realize why we should be in D.C. right about now? I mean, just listen to this guy.
There's a lot of nuance there that I was like, that can't work.
Look,
I don't know.
We lived through something that we're very uniquely situated. Immigration, total dedicated to every little aspect of immigration. How cool is that? criminal stuff, we're always banging things back and forth and having clients in common. We went through our pile, almost the meat of it, all the lawsuits, all the stuff. We both understood our pile was trying to jump up and down to get attention, which is shocking, but to get attention from the federal government to fix their stuff. Our PIO didn't like Texas either, neither do we. Interesting. We're going to have a lot of people in Texas pissed off, but the more people we piss off, the more we have viewers. That'd be good.
Okay.
Let's just piss off all of Texas because they keep jamming everything we want to do up. So my point is, but I don't think Trump's scared of Texas, and I don't think Holman's scared of Texas, and I think they kind of need to know, hey, guys, this is what's habitually been a roadblock for anything immigration to get done. And so at the end of the day, you had kind of a willy-nilly, whoop-de-doo-dah day DACA program that was as good as the presidency of Obama only. And then kind of it's got holes like Swiss cheese. It's just a mess. Everything's a mess.
Litigated for 20 years.
Right. And everything's a bloody mess. And to clean this up is going to be, it's going to take some common sense. It's going to take, you know what, you and I know these people that are here, and they're not different in Texas, and they're not different in Utah, and they're not different in California, and they're not different in wherever you might find them in these here United States of America, but mainly here in our border. They're not different. If there's a self-surrender piece where they can pay their debt to society for crossing a border illegally, if there's a self-surrender piece, they'll do it. And they stay here to earn their, you know, to pay their probation, their time, their penalties, or these things back for having broke the law, because not every person I represent or represented, and now, you know, the firm represents, not every person that we represent goes to prison or goes to jail. There are many people that we represent that didn't cross a line to warrant incarceration, but they do still get a penalty. Yeah. That penalty is probation sometimes. It's sometimes classes, sometimes this, sometimes that. Well, in this case, since we have so many of them, and so much years of back, I mean, we're talking 80 years of this has been a problem. That's a long time. It's almost a century where this has been a problem. And so, isn't that interesting? Yeah. Like when you really rewind the clock, it's like 1957 is when this sucker began. Like before then, you could just show up at Ellis Island or wherever else, and they change your name usually, and instead of, you know, Antolini, you're Vito Corleone, which is kind of cool. It's Godfather. Your grandpa probably watched that too.
Isn't it funny though? Because you said something. Yeah, I've seen the Godfather. Isn't it funny that you said something that struck a chord, and because I'm seeing it a lot more frequently in the last few weeks than I ever have. Is that, you know, we just got through an election season where immigration was a hotbed issue, and I've even heard, you know, people being interviewed that were Latino voters. They're like, yeah, I voted for Trump, but I didn't know this was coming, type of thing. And now I'm regretting my decision or whatever else. And not that people are regretting, but we both lean conservative on our vote for the election. But what is interesting to me is how many people have contacted me in the last few weeks that are on that same leaning political side and didn't realize this was going to affect their friend, or this wasn't going to affect their neighbor. Yep. And like the conversation I was having as I sat down here with my neighbor across the street, you know, conservative white American guy that has this worker that he's loved for a long time, and all of a sudden is in complete fear. And he's like, well, what can I do to help this guy out? And it's interesting that element sometimes got, and that's the part that sometimes gets forgot about when we're doing all this stuff politically, is that the person, and you and I have a better perspective because we deal with people every day that deal with these things. And on an abstract, it sounds like all great ideas, but when you don't have common sense, when you don't have contingency plans in process or in place, there's a lot of real people that get caught up in this, and they tend to all of a sudden, they're calling me going, oh, I didn't think this was going to happen. And I'm like,
I'm going to need you to dig.
Yeah, but I did know this was going to happen. Yeah. And so
I
was a little bit careful. I mean, I still may have voted a certain way because there was other elements of it, but this was something that caused me concern.
We've been talking about the pendulum. How long?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, it was my office receptionist came into my office this morning, and she said, so the Lake and Riley Act passed this morning. And I don't know, for viewers, it was an immigration act that basically penalizes or makes condition mandatory detention on people that were arrested for certain violent crimes, and specifically theft-related crimes. And I'm explaining to her, and she's like, how's this going to affect people? People are calling, whatever else. And I'm like, look, this is what Dana and I talk about on the podcast all the time. This was the biggest overswing on a pendulum.
Yep.
And the reason it was is because the story is Venezuelan guy gets caught for shoplifting. He gets released, catch and released, or released from immigration court on a bond, and then goes and kills someone. So we make the connection that the shoplifting had something to do with the murder. And so now we penalize shoplifting as this violent crime that you cannot leave jail for anymore. And I can't count you how many clients that I've had that either mistakenly, ignorantly, or in a desperation put a pair of lipstick in their pocket or whatever else, and a $10 charge was given, that now they're going to be mandatorily detained, these moms and whatever else. It was such a big pendulum swing. It could have been any crime. Any crime that this guy committed could have been then related, and we pendulum swung it all the way to now shoplifters are murderers. Yeah. It wasn't murder that we then said is mandatory detention. We said shoplifting is mandatory detention.
Or a violent crime could be mandatory detention.
And I'm okay with that because that's got a connection at least to the murder. But the shoplifting, he didn't go kill the store manager, and the reason that he wanted to kill her was to shoplift more.
Right. I understand.
It was totally two different events. And it's like, oh, but we knew that the guy was in the system. Well, yeah, that's with anybody. Like, I don't love this connection of because one person did a bad thing, everybody that comes into the system on that same type of issue.
So how do you explain that? How does your office staff explain it?
Yeah, and so she's like, and so I'm like, look, the advice you give to people as they call in is don't shoplift. That's the easiest advice. And that would have been the advice anyway, but be even more hyper aware. Like if your kid's got something in their pocket and you didn't realize it, you got to pay attention to them.
Now you and I have to figure out a way, we on our end have to figure a way to dig the knowledge out of you. What do we change that charge to while we're fixing it?
Yeah, we exactly take a diversion, or we somehow avoid jail time so that they're not
in ICE's hands.
And it's just, but it was such a big pendulum swing. I'm going, again, this is what we do. So we've got an asylum problem, we got a border problem, and then we're going to swing it all the way to we're going to capture everyone that's ever come into the country.
I think that there's pressure.
And I think
it's interesting.
No, there's pressure for
I think that there's pressure to move and do and get some eyeballs right now, like you were saying at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then after a few months,
that's my hope, is that we'll calm it down.
It's going to have to naturally anyway. But there needs to be, like I said, it's the Holy Grail. Everybody with a D or everybody with an R, whomever gets this figured out and gets it passed, champions something that works, which has been broke for 80 plus years. Every aspect of immigration is mismanaged, poorly written, absolutely outdated. At a minimum, outdated's a nice word. I mean, I don't think it was up to date when it was passed.
Yeah.
And so we need something that looks like America.
So do you know what needs to happen? And this is the problem I have, is because, like we were just talking about before, the social media is fear mongering or creating fear that doesn't need to exist. But at the same time, there's parts of truth of everything. Right. The one thing that I would encourage the community to do is as you do hear real stories and are dealing with real people, there needs to be a push of humanity on this. And so that news story does need to be reported.
Yeah.
It does need to you need to get out there and say, my neighbor with 5 kids and 2 of them are Down syndrome just got detained and had not committed a crime.
Which we're going to see a lot of.
Oh, sure. Those need to be, so the humanity comes back into because right now it's just numbers, right? It's just numbers, and no people are attached to those numbers. They put the photo of the one MS-13 guy that they got out of the 45. And sure, and I know that the government's playing the same propaganda, game that everybody else. But there needs to be not the fear necessarily, but the humanity needs to be brought in from the other side, so that as this progresses, we start to get some element of balance, so that pendulum starts to swing back, so that we can actually take care of the actual problem. Because you're either going to have one of two things. I really don't think that the fear is going to be enough where you're going to drive 10 million people out of the country.
You're not going to.
Because I think that what they're facing in Mexico may even be worse.
Yep.
And so they still got to balance that life. I mean, they'd love to not have to have fear, but I think that the fear of going back there is even worse. But then if you're not forcing them out, then you're forcing them into the shadows, and then you're not keeping track of them. They're not reporting crimes. They're not, like we talked about, not going to sending their kids to school.
Then what changes?
And then you've created all these pocket communities that are hard to control and hard to have pay taxes and do all the things that we want to do.
Then what changes? Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. Then we've driven them into the shadows.
None of this makes sense right now, but there is likely a play afoot. But the Lake and Riley Act was something I disagreed with as far as it went. It went way too far.
Yeah, I didn't mind but just the shoplifting element was just so weird that they made the connection.
It went
there.
Too far.
But the propaganda is, well, why wouldn't we penalize criminals?
The problem is if that same person that committed that crime was arrested and was in front of a judge during, let's say, the Obama administration, that person is either paying a bond and then getting detained for not having papers, or they're not going to be able to be out while fighting this case. That's the difference, is he's not out.
Yeah.
During Biden is the only time you and I have ever seen where people are just getting out.
No, it's always, I mean, bonds have existed forever.
Well, I understand bond on the immigration side, yes.
On the criminal side?
On the criminal side.
Oh, yeah.
They were just getting out. I had countless people with no documents, no nothing, that were being released. I'm like, holy crap, we could deal with your DUI. Holy crap, we can deal with your shoplift. Holy crap, we can deal with your trespass. We can deal with your aggravated assault. We can deal with this.
Before we get into immigration.
Right. It was amazing.
That's true.
It was amazing. That had never happened.
So
we just had 4 years of something I'd never seen. Not in any administration prior. Not Trump, not Obama, not Bush, not blah, 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 blah. And so that is what they need to focus on with the Lake and Riley thing is they don't really have to say that, but you can say it out loud just for fun because it is so. To say, you're arrested for a crime and you don't have papers.
Problem is you're mixing state and federal law.
You are.
So, yeah, that's up to the state.
And that is an issue.
So they had to take it where they can have jurisdiction, and it's on the federal side, so it means on the immigration side. But the tough part for me is like, look, I have guys that I can get out on a DUI, which to me, I consider that worse than a shoplifting charge of the $10 lipstick. But I can't get now. This is the pendulum swing that now I can get my DUI guy out, I can get my domestic violence guy out, but I can't get my $10 of lipstick and a shoplifting on.
You're hitting a chord that I don't want. I never wanted to talk about this again, but I will. This little Guatemalan gal comes in. This has got to be 15 years, and it's like burning in my mind right now, and I'm like, crap. So I remember her name, and after representing thousands of people, you kind of tend to
forget some. And this gal comes in and she's got nabbed for shoplifting at the Walgreens. Admitted to me, yeah, I took it. I just wanted to smell pretty for my husband. He seems to be losing interest, yada, yada, yada. Like, and you know how simple some of these folks are and just sincere. And she was just so just like distraught, ashamed. And it's like, okay, well, the result worked out fine, but these are the people that we want, right? And it's like, and I get it. The argument is well, they're criminals, but what people have to understand is that the system's not set up to not give. We don't just incarcerate, and it's never been. That's part of our Constitution. Is you have a right to trial, you have a right to get out on bond, especially for nonviolent crimes, and be with your family. And you still have to pay for them. You still have to go to court. Sure. And that's the way the immigration system works. They still have to go to court.
Right.
The issue was here that somehow we make the connection that because we let him out and go back to his family on this shoplifting charge, that if we could have held him, he wouldn't have murdered. Now maybe that's true. But maybe you just deported him and he came back into the country and murdered. Like right. The connection there just didn't quite fit.
It's not good enough, but they didn't need it, in my opinion. They didn't need it.
So
they just put something in that was unnecessary.
Now, if you wanted to just make the argument generally that, oh, he was an immigrant, he shouldn't have been out, and that's a more extreme argument than deport him, okay. That makes even more sense, even though I don't like that. That makes more sense than the shoplifting is the result of the murder.
He's here illegally. And therefore, we need to crack down on illegal immigration. Okay, that makes some sense. I get that.
Or a domestic violence one. Yeah, like the domestic violence ones where you've got a couple of domestic violence against a wife, and then he really beats up the wife, and you're like, okay, yeah, that right. I agree. Maybe we should have looked at that a little bit harder when we had him.
Yeah, the Ricky Lucy defense.
But I've seen so many dinky shoplifting, because shoplifting, what people don't understand is there's a lot of, you can be charged with shoplifting if you're with a friend who puts something in their pocket. And so
slides lip gloss in her purse and bada bing, out they go.
It's just
Reed's 21 years old. I don't know if his mic is hot or not. He's 21 years old. He was at this little gathering, and he doesn't know who Arpaio is. Do you, Reed? Joe Arpaio, right? That says it all. Probably heard the name. What was surprising to myself, and Reed was just kind of sitting there looking at this, what was surprising was how many people understood that the trial day, that the Arpaio days, there was a handful in there that lived through them. And they're like, yeah, no, life was, and I said, just don't.
Oh, I use that all the time. You made it through the Arpaio days.
Here we are again. We've seen this story.
You made it through Trump's first administration.
Right. We've seen this story. We're going to be okay. We're going to have to figure out what makes sense. If somebody watching this sends it to somebody else that watches it, sends it to somebody else that watches it, and finally, I heard Mr. President on the phone yesterday at least 47 times. Mr. President, oh, Mr. President. They're all scared of Mr. President. It's interesting how they say that, Mr. President. Somebody that normally they probably supported because they didn't like what was going on at the border either. And now all of a sudden they've got hellfire damnation in their minds raining down. Most of it is propaganda, social media frenzy, hysteria. Most of it will not affect the great percentage of the people here.
I hope
Most
so.
of it will not affect. So no tenga miedo. Don't be scared. Get out there, do your thing. Just be smart about life.
No, for 4 days I just got the fear calls. Yeah. Yesterday was the first one where I got the actual, they were waiting for, and I was kind of frustrated. I apologized to my office manager. She came to me and she's like, okay, here's the thing. And I'm like, well, do they have all their criminal documents? Well, they don't. Wife's just afraid. She doesn't know what's going on. Has he been deported? She doesn't know. And I'm like, and I was frustrated. I'm like, I can't help her. I don't have enough information. Like, go tell her to get. But really, all she wanted to hear was there was an attorney that might help her out if all works out and whatever else. And and it's going to take a mindset change for me, because I've lived for the last 4 years at least, and maybe even longer, where
a little bit longer.
I didn't do a ton of detention work. I didn't like it in the first place. Usually the guys that were detained were pretty bad dudes. I didn't even take the cases in the first place. So all the petty stuff that now is starting to rear its ugly head again is something I didn't deal with in the last 4 years. I really am not in the mood to deal with them again. But I have to change my mindset, because I've got to put myself in the shoes of the wife, who's now the U.S. citizen, scared that her husband just got taken away and doesn't know why and whatever else. And there's a lot of, I've got to calm fears and go in with a different mentality. And I was frustrated and going, look, I don't have enough information. Like, she doesn't know anything. Send her to the police office, send her whatever else. But that's not what they want to hear.
Don't send her to the consulate.
No, yeah, exactly. And that's not what and I've got to switch my mentality and say, okay, let's be patient.
I shouldn't have said that. They were gracious
call.
enough. I go on.
Anyway. So it's going to be hard for me, even, because it's not my favorite type of work.
And you coach basketball 57 times a week. You got a house being built.
No, it's just
your pets' heads are falling off.
No, it's for sure. I came home last night and complained to my wife and was like, I've got to switch my head around, because I've been able to provide a lot of positive benefit and positive things in the last 4 years, and there might be a lot of negative that's coming up. And
here comes the scar, and you know what the calluses feel like. Yeah,
and I know when I see those families ripped apart, and I'm mentally. I just wasn't ready to switch yesterday when that first one came in. For 5 days, or for 5 weeks, I've been trying to calm everyone's fears down. That's okay. I'm okay having those conversations, because it wasn't reality.
Yeah.
But when the wife's coming in crying, now it's becoming reality. And like, gosh, here we go again. So.
Yep, here comes the blisters, here comes the scars, here comes the calluses. Yeah. Here they come.
Yep.
And we've been here before, man.
I know. I got to just switch the mentality.
Let's just saddle up.
It's a brain switch.
You're going to have to start watching John Wayne's like your grandpa.
Start getting calloused.
Yeah, start getting
come through me.
It'll work. Yeah, they need a mindset like ours. We have a unique way of looking at this. We literally practiced and found every hole that was offered, even any chance we could to get folks in process and proceedings that worked out for them. Trying to make lemonade out of lemons. Oftentimes, we're very successful at doing that often. all throughout the Arpaio time, and Arpaio would actually aid in my end of things often. My end of things now, which ultimately benefited when they landed in you're like, oh, but the one that we talked about the other day, we had the two mothers that were arrested simultaneously working for that vitamin shop in Tempe. And you just barely got her permanent documents, I believe, not just a couple of years ago, a year ago. I mean, pretty recently. And to hear that, I was like, cool, that's awesome. But man, was that a
long process? Was
that a rodeo?
Yeah. And the other girl got out.
I don't like to talk about Nora. That was Nora. Yeah. And I that one hurts. That one hurts.
Yes, that was the humanity part of it that we have to deal with.
There's the callous.
So that is one thing that, if anybody wants to hear me soapbox on that, there is a human side of this that you and I get to see, and just remember that as this is happening, and like I said, that doesn't change my political thoughts on it. There is a change that needs to happen. The border needed to be figured out. Asylum needed to be figured out. I'm totally okay with some of these, but as these roundups happen, there are people that are mothers and fathers of 5 and 6 kids, and there's going to be some people that are going to suffer as part of this too. So there's always consequences and side effects.
And it is real. It is real. And you've seen their eyeballs and you have connected with them. And these are people that are very important to many of us. And everybody's got, unless you live under a rock.
And you got your landscaper or your neighbor.
Sure, you have somebody that's cleaning your home or somebody that's delivering something, whatever the case might be. I mean, it's just kind of, it is what it is. So,
but the thing
your
that
kids are getting invited to their kids' parties. They come back and say they throw the best parties because they're candy and this thing I'm swinging at and banging and bust open candy. And I'm like, piñata? How does my kid not know what a piñata is?
Wow.
Well, yeah, Reed knows now, but I mean, growing up, his head was so far up. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, it's a very real thing. Yeah. It's palpable. And so, our humanity, our mercy, justice thing. And so what we've been kicking around here that makes some sense for the populace, and of course, perfect? No, but it makes sense. So you have a lot of pairs of shoes, I've noticed, because every time you come in here, you're wearing a different pair of shoes. It's pretty cool. How many would you guesstimate that you have?
Not my wife, but maybe.
Oh, no, you can't. I'm not asking that. Maybe. I'm not asking that question because I can't count that high.
40 maybe?
That's pretty good for a fella.
Do you more than your wife or less?
No, his wife's probably, your wife outdoes you with shoes?
Oh, gall.
Yeah.
Just flip-flops. I was looking at one. I was like, you have 100 pairs of flip-flops. And she's like, but they're flip-flops. They cost $15. I'm like, I don't care. Why do you need 100 pairs of flip-flops? And nobody wears flip-flops anymore either. That's kind of not in style anymore.
I still wear them because I'm not in style, period.
I can't wear them anymore. I tried. When I came down here, it took me 10 years to adjust to wearing them. And then I did for a period of time. And now that they're not, now the kids are wearing the Birks and whatever else, I've switched back to that. Yeah.
I don't like the Birks.
Yeah, no.
That is grungy to me.
Not a real flip-flop guy. They hurt your feet.
Let's carry on. Yeah. My point is, you don't have a good set of reefs. Old school reefs. Just break some in and you're convinced.
They have slide-in reefs too.
I wouldn't be caught dead in a slide-in. Now, if I played basketball and I was going from point A to point B in my socks.
I'm a tennis shoe and Birks. That's it, man, other than work shoes.
So we're going to need to get you a pair of boots. No. When we go to D.C., we're going in boots.
My wife has always wanted to marry a cowboy, and I am the furthest from a cowboy.
That's okay.
And so she can have her fantasies in another part, but it ain't going to be me.
When we're going to D.C., we're wearing boots.
There's no way those are comfortable. Everyone tells me they're comfortable.
I'll buy them with you. I know which ones to get. We're wearing boots.
My best friend is a cowboy. He's from Queen Creek, and he lives in Texas now. And he's a lawyer in Texas. But one time he would come to law school every day with a pressed pair of Wranglers and a button-up, like the snap button-up shirts. And his wife would iron them for him every morning. This is when we were young bucks, right? He had one kid. And then I'd see him, because we were buddies, like at home. And immediately when he got home, he took those off. And he's in his basketball shorts or his T-shirt or whatever else. And I'm like, why in the world are you wearing this every day? But it was like his law school outfit.
They're vain.
So one day I put those on to wear to school, and everybody did not take me seriously.
Well,
And
no.
I've not put on a Wrangler since,
We're-
nor before.
We're going
And he has a
boots.
picture on it, and that he shows me all the time, that he kept on his phone. That in a pair of his
I
Wranglers.
need this picture. Look, I'm telling you, we're going in boots because we're going to kick some ass because we got to figure some things out.
I'm not wearing boots.
Fair enough. I'll let you pick one of your 40 pair. I mean, why spend money? Your wife has got 100 pair of flip flops that only cost $15. So
My wife has a pair of cowboy boots, and she's going to some. I mean, we've got Morgan Wallen tickets, so that's about as far
I
as my
really
country
feel like
roots
you
go.
just at least need boots. I'm not telling you to get Wranglers.
I can't do boots, man. They don't look comfortable. All right, but I'm okay with the kicking some.
Yeah, we need to kick it. We really do because this thing needs to hit. And so, and nobody in government is solution oriented, in my opinion. And we have a solution trend right now. So one good piece of this pendulum swing is the solution trend. So let's at least jump on that piece of things to ride that to,
Whatever comes
something
next.
to make some
Something more
sense because
common
it's got to
sense.
look commonsensical. It's got to look good to where an R or a D is going to vote for this thing to make it permanent. But we have a couple of years to get that done. And so the reality is I don't think it would take even that long to show its effectiveness.
No, I agree. Let's do it. Peace.
Okay? Subscribe, share with three friends, and no tenga miedo. Oh, and comment and such, and all that jazz.